We did the same thing. We were thinking it'd be better just to stay there.
Hey, Darcy.
Morning.
Darcy, we had a great meeting with Denny on the
Good.
Beaver River.
Good.
Yeah, I think that's going to really, maybe Greg's really excited about it.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a great product.
Good. Nice. I haven't chatted with her about it. Besides what you're. Oh, well, better than throwing in the towel and not meeting, I guess.
Alrighty, if anyone joins late, that's fine. We can start with a quick round of introductions. I'm running the meeting. Stephanie's on her way and also has the PRA meeting a little bit later. So trial by fire, so take it easy on me. My name is Kevin. I'm from the Blackstone Watershed Collaborative. I'm the finance and program manager. We'll go around the room and then we'll go on.
How to sign up for and track their hours with better impact.
Yeah, Matt Gendron, I'm a fisheries biologist, AEM Fish and Wildlife, and project manager for Blackstone.
Hi everyone, I'm Rachel Holbert, Narragansett Bay Research Reserve, and here at Rhode Island DM.
Morning, John O'Brien with the Nature Conservancy.
Morning, Darcy, Narragansett Bay Estuary Program.
We'll go with Kevin.
Oh, hey, Kevin Clyburn, National Park Service.
We'll go with Sean.
I can also.
Yeah, Sean Rudolph, Weston O'Neill.
Nils.
Morning, Nils Weberg, Fuss and O'Neill.
We got Emily, who wrote in chat, no mic today, but from the city of Pawtucket. Kyla.
Hi, I'm Kyla with Fuss and O'Neill.
Jason.
Morning, everybody. Jason Rodine, DEM.
Katie.
Hey, this is Kate McPherson, Save the Bay's Narragansett Bay Riverkeeper.
Are you also Katie in the Zoom call as well? Oh.
Hi, different Katie, maybe. I'm with Fuss and O'Neill.
Katie, alrighty. And I think Stephanie's losing traffic in and out, connection in and out. But Stephanie will be here at some point with the Blackstone Watershed Collaborative. So on our agenda today, I can pull up. So any follow-up discussion on the Fuss and O'Neill renderings for Main Street and Slater Mill? Any follow-ups that anyone's come up with over the past day? Kevin, I know that you folks weren't able to be here due to the government shutdown. Have you had a chance to look those over? Are there any concerns from the Park Service point of view?
We did take a quick look, and we do not have any concerns with what's in there. So,
right. Great news. Thank you. Number two, we have updates on Main Street and Slater Mill Fish Passage permitting. So there's a second meeting with Pawtucket PRA today to finalize permit application signatures. Any update on scares, anything like that? How the permit process looks, anything of that sort?
Well, I guess I could just provide a little bit of a brief update here. You know, we've been in contact with obviously the staff at the city over the last several days to provide the draft permit applications to the respective agencies, which, you know, really entail CRMC and Army Corps of Engineers, Write-in Water Quality Cert, and also write-on for the physical alteration permit. So we have provided all the packages and permitting drawing set. I can take a few minutes to walk through that if anybody is interested. And we've gotten a couple of signature forms to date for CRMC from the building official and the zoning official. We have been working with Kyle and Jason Pizzullo with the city to kind of facilitate the logistics of, getting the ink hard copy signatures for the respective forms that the city and or PRAs formally listed as a property owners, but obviously they're an entity of the city. But Jason has a role as commerce director for the city and also executive director of the PRA. So we see him as being a person that could, sign with the representation of both entities if there were to be any issues in administrative review for those applications. Mike Wilcox is with the city DPW. And he has an account with RIDEM's permitting portal that's now been deployed. So he is going to be signing for the city for the water quality cert. So we've also had some communication with Jason McNamee, who has indicated, as I understand, that he would be signing as the applicant on some of these applications, particularly the Army Corps of Engineers, as the entity that would be contracting for the actual contracting of the work. In other words, putting it out to bid and hiring a contractor. So there's a few places that Jason will need to sign as well. So our goal right now, everything's really lined up, obviously, to work through the discussions, answer any questions with the PRA, the meeting today, and then a matter of logistically just getting Jason's and the two Jasons, I guess I'll say, signatures on each of the forms, and then compiling everything into the copies and PDFs to be uploaded over the next couple of weeks.
Any questions on any of that? Comments, concerns? Alrighty, so we do have in there that the different permits that are going to be submitted by the end of the year, which you already covered, so that's all good.
Yeah, we're going to move the write-up permit up. It was a pretty simplified application, and the materials are already derived from other packages that we're providing. We see that as being more of a opportunity for write-up to look at what we're planning on the drawings and then seeing what their questions and concerns are. In other words, what additional information they want to have. We'll probably have some form of call it a permit initiation conference where we can have the respective technical disciplines at write-up between the traffic and structures and rights of way, legal, to kind of provide input on what specifically they will want to have developed for their review and ultimately, process. So.
Anything else on Main Street, Slider Mill?
Well, I guess, once we get these applications signed, obviously we'll just be working through the, administrative review if there's anything that comes up, as well as the in response to comments, section 106, consultations with the SHPO, and also solicitation of consultations with the tribal entities as well. So PAL will be assisting us with that, and we'll be obviously coordinating that through RIDEM, as there's no lead federal agency currently associated with the project. We'll be working through kind of a Section 50 process, as I understand. But anyway, we'll be getting that process going through as well. So when Army Corps does go to the the federal consultations in section 106, they can see what has transpired in the intervening time. And John, I don't know if you have anything else to add. We do have discussions relative to easements with the PRA. That's been something that they've noted of concern. I have a graphic here if you'd like me to put it on the screen, just showing where those easement areas are. They correspond to limits of disturbance. Okay.
And is that going to be shown as well at today's PRA meeting?
Yep. Awesome. And we had given this to them before, but let me see here. I think you should be seeing my my blue beam here. This is really just a set of slides that we put together to kind of walk through who's signing what and what the actual forms are within each application. And then this is the graphic that we put together, and I think that you have seen it before. But we just identified these areas of where construction at the primary construction access point from adjacent paved undisturbed areas would be. So the light green areas are areas that are owned by, as you can see, the Pawtucket Redevelopment Agency, CO City of Pawtucket. And then the Slater Mill East Lot parcel, which is indicated as owned by the Pawtucket Redevelopment Agency solely. So we have this one area here, which is not a designated parcel, but is the city has indicated that it has, ownership and control of that land. And so again, there's no designation for us to indicate on the application forms as to a map or a lot number, but we're identifying it as City of Pawtucket land as well. So the interest here, the goal through the easements would be to gain the right of access for both the construction phase as well as for the post-construction operation and maintenance of the Fishway by RIDEM. So that would include, the mechanical and structural, any debris or sediment or anything that needs to be addressed within the channel of the Fishway, as well as the eel pass. There is an eel pass trap inside the Fishway with an access point through the grading at the surface for RIDEM to come in here. We have a little kind of an entranceway for RIDEM to get a vehicle here, access that trap, and then count and bring the eels up. And then obviously eels are currently migrating through the river channel. We're putting in ropes and chains to facilitate their passage over these structures. But again, the trap was something that we had incorporated based upon discussions with RIDEM fishery staff. And then, excuse me, the viewing and counting area will be here. That will be in a publicly accessible plaza, but this would be another point where RIDEM will have the ability to get actually inside the Fishway with dip nets to count, tag, measure, monitor fish. And obviously we'll have a counting station as well for the public to be able to go through and see the fish migrating and participate in the counting of the numbers as that upstream migration period occurs. So again, the interest here would be for RIDEM to have right of access for construction as well as access to the Fishway for the operation and maintenance through those parcels.
The gray parcel of land at the east lot on the river. Who owns that?
This is actually part of the Slater Mill East lot, but it's not within the limit of disturbance. We're not proposing any activity here, so we're not going to be requesting an easement for access in this area of the site.
Any questions on the easement?
Yeah, so this is Kate. I just, is this the entire limit of disturbance that we're proposing for the project or just where the easements are?
This is the entire limit of disturbance. This black line is the actual, actually, let me see if I can zoom in, the limit of disturbance line. Okay. So PRA was very concerned about the area of the footprint for construction access and staging. We do need an area where we can just put like a trailer, for the contractor and the engineer, in the, in a corridor here. But we really narrowed down the footprint to, a very limited area for the construction of the fishway. This area is less constrained, but when you get through the fishway here, it's gonna, the entire site will be disturbed through the period of construction.
How wide is that access from the staging area?
How wide is it? I believe it's
Yeah.
30 feet.
Okay.
Yep.
Could you do a narrower access if PRA really blocks there, or?
Of course, yeah, that's part of the conversation, and
Okay.
they don't, obviously their request for proposals has just recently gone out, so they don't have any specific plans when they engage with a developer, and the developer has more specific improvements in mind in terms of land areas that it would like to make available, vertical structures, other uses, and the timelines for those uses will kind of refine what areas are available and when and how, so that we can dovetail and avoid or minimize any potential conflicts with their project's goals. But their question is like, well, when is your project going to be constructed? And we have goals for when it will be constructed based upon when permits will be issued and the availability of funding for construction. But, we've indicated to them that probably the earliest that construction could begin would be the end of 27. And it would be, 6 to 9 month project to build this infrastructure at the minimum.
Thanks.
So I think I heard that Emily was on the call, so I don't want to speak for Pawtucket, but what I had heard from Kyle was that they have their bids in hand and they'll be reviewing them over the next month. So in January, we'll have more information about which contractor or set of contractors will be working in the area and how this project can fit in. I just had one question on mapping. Do we have the maps separated of this is a temporary easement from Pawtucket, this is permanent from Pawtucket, this is temporary PRA, this is permanent PRA, so that we can really understand what we're requesting?
We do not. That's not part of our scope of work right now. I don't know. I believe that TNC may have funding for the purposes of developing these easements. And if that is the case, then we would go into those particulars and work with Matt and other fisheries staff and Patrick to get more specific, be more specific about where RIDEM will want to have access to respective portions of the fishway and where they would get those access and what times of year and things of that nature. So I do believe that the post-construction O&M footprint for the easement will be smaller than and more specific than the construction phase footprint.
So do we have a timeline of requesting those easements?
I don't know, John, do you want to speak to, what TNC envisions for that, or perhaps Jay?
I have no timeline on this. I think we're just, continuing to work with PRA and try to get concurrence that these easements will have potential. I don't know, Jason, do you have any input on that?
No, nothing to add. It's just tough to know right now.
Could that be something that we elevate a little bit so that in January, once PRA knows their contractors, that could be the time where we feel really confident in what we're asking for so we can make sure that that does fit in with that work from the beginning?
Sure, if that was to me, maybe I'm misunderstanding. I thought we were, you know, I thought the question was, if we knew when we would start needing, these access sites and things like that, but maybe that's not what you meant. So I apologize if I misunderstood the question.
Oh, I'm just wondering when we can sort of draft and sign and secure these easements for the project, since, I know we can't do it without the easements, and I know that PRA's had the questions of, okay, what do you really need in terms of construction? What do you really need in terms of permanent easements? So I know that they're reviewing their bids now. They'll have that information in January. So I'm hoping that in January, when they release, okay, here are the contractors we're working with, these are their plans, is at that time we can be prepared to say, great, here contractors, these are what we need for easements. Here PRA, does this still make sense? Can we get these, signed and completed from the get-go so that the contractors have those easements within their work considerations?
Yeah, I gotcha. So yeah, I think so. The permitting is kind of has been the focus right now.
For sure.
Yeah, so I hadn't really, there's no reason why we couldn't do that. I think there's some sequencing that we have to think through with some of those, like the permits have a shelf life, right? But yeah, the easements don't. And there's like not, I'm just kind of like thinking on the fly, but there's not like a lot of other options, right? This is like what we would need to do to make this work. So, yeah, I think it makes sense to start thinking in that direction and start locking those easements down in some way. So once we know who the people are that are working in the area, we can start to do that for sure.
Okay, and so I guess a John question is then, do we have those funds so that we are able to move on to this next step?
So the question is, back to Fuss and O'Neill, and we're saying that within the contract, there's no deliverable to resolve and secure easements, only to give us a conceptual overview of where we think the easements will be needed based upon funding and go ahead with construction. So Nils, we have to have a conversation about that. If in your budget, within your set of deliverables, doesn't include the ability to move forward with securing easements at this time, and then resolve it.
Yeah, we can look at reallocating some of the available budget that, we can perhaps move to that effort if it becomes a priority. I know, again, we have a budget for the NEPA and Section 106 consultations. If this is something that is a higher priority, then, maybe we can shift things there. We also have time here for these, attendance at these types of meetings. And if we want to try to, again, shift some budget, then we can look at doing that. Certainly want to do everything that we can. And I think, certainly there's a certain amount of kind of general sharpening of the pencil to be more specific in a informal sense, but when it comes down to drafting the legal language and the metes and bounds and having a professional licensed surveyor involved to develop these these legal documents, that's something that, again, we would just need to look at it a little more closely to see what the level of effort would be and who those professionals and legal advisors would be to allow us to provide something that could eventually and ultimately be executed and filed with the town's, property records in the cities. So once the dust settles and we get this, coming into the new year, the permits are submitted, we'll kind of look and see where we are. And John, we'll set up a meeting with you and Scott and Jason to kind of reorient where we want to focus our resources.
Got it.
Yeah, and I don't want to not do the permitting. I know that that's important and I don't need to be naive. I just feel like in the permitting often also, I know we're getting the signatures, so it feels like it's okay, we can continue, but I know that that's something that, if we're gonna go for another application for funders, for instance, that's something that they typically look for is, do you have control of the land? And right now we don't, even if we do have the signatures on applications, so I feel like that would just help our position for future funding sources, if that's what we're looking for, if we have control. So in my mind, the sooner the better. And obviously we're in sort of this state of pending right now because we don't know the contractors and so they're not going to give us any easements until they have that. But I would, if possible, I feel like it would be smart and behoove us to be prepared in January when PRA is ready to talk easements. It would be nice if we could also be ready. And I don't know if that timeline will work out, but
We can clearly be ready.
okay.
The question is, at what point do you execute?
Yeah.
How much information do you have from PRA based upon the RFP and the submissions and where they want to go? And what sort of concerns are they going to have and how do we work around that? So we can be ready for it. But as far as, moving ahead with executing, I think that we need to work with him. They need to work with the submissions and the proposals that they're getting.
Right.
And they need to digest that and interpret it and then come forward and say, listen, this is what we really want to do. We have 2 or 3 options here. This is our number 1 option, but it's going to conflict with what you want to do, and how can we negotiate to come to some kind of a middle ground?
Yeah, and I think it will definitely be a conversation and negotiation, which is also my instinct of start this conversation sooner rather than later.
And if we show them an example of what permanent easements and what temporary easements might be conceivable, then they can work around that.
And I think from my conversations and listening to PRA meetings, I think it's incredibly important to separate those. This is PRA permanent, this is PRA temporary. This is Pawtucket permanent, this is Pawtucket temporary, and have each of those laid out, because
Different colors and everything. Yeah.
I think separate maps.
Sure.
Separate maps will just be or one for each entity that shows both or something. But I think that there's a lot of confusion right now over what's what, and it might not. I think we have the information. I think they just haven't necessarily digested it super easily so that they're really understanding. And I think they're very hesitant around easements, and so we just want to be as clear as possible about what we're asking for and why. And I don't mean that we should have this conversation today with them, because I don't want to necessarily muddy the waters around, we're not asking for that right now, we're just asking for you to sign these permits. The permits don't allow us to do the things, they just give us the permit to move forward, right? So we do want to sort of separate those conversations. I just want to be prepared in January when we need to have those.
The biggest challenge is going to be the construction easements. And that's where it's going to depend upon what they have in mind for this area.
Right.
And how can we fit in a construction easement for a lay down area for storage, for equipment, for materials. That's probably gonna be the biggest challenge. To the permanent easement, based upon, you know, the graphics that we've been showing them is almost implied, you know. This is where we wanna walk, this is where we wanna move.
I just wouldn't make that assumption. It really.
Yeah, let's draw a line around it instead of implying it, explicitly stated.
Well, this is the line that's been drawn, so I don't think there's anything ambiguous about this graphic in terms of where the limit of work is and where we want to be on each of these properties. So, but certainly, you know, having those meetings and answering those questions and continuing the process is very important. So I think we can all agree on that.
And then also a point for today's meeting about signing the application forms. Just be clear to them that you're just asking them for permission to apply for a permit. They're not signing a permit, it's just a permit application.
Right.
Because sometimes people hear permit and they think permission.
True, fair.
Hi, this is Kyle from Pawtucket. I don't know if I met everyone on this call, but I just want to, I jumped in a little late, but I just want to concur with Stephanie and what you were saying about just having the clear, and Nels, I do think this has been pretty clear, but the easements after Stephanie was right with the timeline with the city. They're opening the documents next week just so we'll know who's bid on what, but then the whole process of like reviewing everything and doing interviews. This is like a really interesting RFP because people can pick and choose, or like we as a city can kind of pick and choose from different proposals what people are doing on different parcels. Like they kind of like worded it that way. So we'll kind of like and that whole process of reviewing that will be hopefully done by January. I think that's like the hope. It may extend further. But yeah, this is and then the next conversation with this group, I think the discussion about easements is going to potentially, especially about permanent easements, I think is potentially going to take like a little bit of work. And the most right now, the most thing about permanent easements is going to be really the permanent easements for like I think the maintenance is might be something that not for the fish passage itself, because but might be the maintenance access. So yeah, but we can definitely, and right now I think so much of the hedging that is happening with the city is because of this whole gateway RFP. So hopefully after that, we can definitely just actually make a little bit more progress, just even in our conversations about easements. Because right now I think I know it must be frustrating to have just all the hedging from the city because it's just like, we just don't know. I don't know if there's any other questions. I'm not a decision maker on this type of thing, but I know I've been in these conversations and the climate at the city. Also, I also know something that would be, and this is very much in the future, I wouldn't, and I know this is being recorded, so don't take my word on this at all, but I wouldn't be surprised if the city, we've all been in meetings where they keep asking about construction funding. I wouldn't be surprised if the city just keeps asking about that. And if there's like more clear actual construction funding for the project, that's when they are, I don't know. I know that's like way in the future, but that just, the city has that attitude that this project has been going on for so long that it's in their mind that I think some people think it'll never happen without seeing that there's been clear construction funding allocated towards it.
Yeah, that's definitely not the first time we've heard that, so. Thanks. So I guess anything else on permitting or easements to check out?
I mean, I'll just throw in that, you know, and I know it's not the first time I've heard this, but the Park Service will need and will, you know, an easement for access to the dam for, you know, the ongoing repair, or else we can't take ownership of it. So, that I know that's part of the mix here as well.
Kevin, that's regardless of fish passage, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Next up, we have Elizabeth Webbing. So we have the presentation last month with the the specs on and the matrix on lowering the dam or keeping it the same, different types of fish passage, different lengths. So does anyone have any update on that? Questions, comments, concerns? We also have things like the Lewis Yip meeting to update or modify the covenant. I don't know if that meeting happened yet, Jason.
Yeah, I can definitely update that. I didn't know if Sean had wanted to offer anything first on the alternatives. I don't know if there's any, there might not be an update there, but anything from you first, Sean?
Yeah, I don't know, Nils. I mean, if you want to jump in, but
Yeah,
yeah,
I was gonna just put it up on screen. Sorry to interrupt.
yeah, no,
You
that's
and I,
okay.
yeah, you and I talked about getting this up, and we can just, kind of give an update if that's where you'd like to start, Jason.
Yeah,
Do you
Kevin
want me
is
to
up.
pull it open?
I got it up right now.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good. We can touch on your meeting with Mr. Yip after this.
Right.
Okay, well, this is, Sean and Katie have worked, over the last, couple months, obviously, on the materials and the analyses. And I just wanted to do kind of a page turn here. This report is still being reviewed by PNC and Rightum. So we will be working with them over the next couple of weeks into early January. And then, we'll provide a copy, for more wide distribution that will allow others to review and ask questions and provide input before the report is wrapped up. We do have a schedule to complete this report for mid-January. So we'll want to think about when we want to try to re-engage here in that second week of January for additional meetings or review and discussion. But I think for purposes of the analyses that Sean noted in the considerations, the criteria, the hydraulics governing the 9 alternatives that we had in the last meeting, I think everything in the report falls in lines with those. We're just more elucidating the considerations and the factors that guide, what is being recommended as a preferred alternative here. But I have here, again, just an overview of the table of contents that's been developed with the different areas in terms of, the project overview and the goals. The field investigations that have been completed with regard to, infrastructure at the site, transportation infrastructure, particularly the 2 bridges, Roosevelt Avenue Bridge and the Amtrak Bridge upstream, topographic and bathymetric surveys, the wetland resources and characterization, upstream wetlands that have been mapped on RIGIS, cultural resources at the site, and sediment sampling and testing that has been completed as well. And that really just sets the framework and the foundation for the evaluations of the different alternatives between the target species, the hydraulics, and where some of those other considerations come in. So again, I'll just kind of take a page turn here in the next 5 or 10 minutes, and if folks have questions, let us know. Obviously, there are these additional materials that we'll have as attachments. Again, this is really set up as a graphical report to make it more accessible to stakeholders and the public. As
Can I
opposed,
interrupt you for
Yeah,
one
of
second?
course.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Can you just make your screen presentation mode so it's a little bit
Oh,
bigger
yeah.
for us, please?
Let me make it
Thank
a
you very
full
much.
screen here. You see it, press F11. I'm gonna make sure I don't put my.
Sorry, I forget it's a different program, so it's not as easy as just pressing present, maybe.
You know what? I actually have it up on PowerPoint here, so I'll just go into presentation mode. All right, let me just do that now. That way it'll be a little bit easier.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, of course. And Sean, obviously you've done all the work on this to put it together, but if there's anything that we see that we want to clarify by all means. Really just identifying where the four dams on the river that are the goal, the focus of this project, the Elizabeth Webbing Dam. Just in terms of the goals and the FERC facility here at the project site and the goals for restoration of the river itself. The phasing of the project that's being implemented right now, obviously the future phase being 4 here to implement and permit the preferred alternative. Really just kind of looking at some of the previous assessments that have been completed at the site. Obviously, Army Corps did a study that looked at a number of alternatives. And again, we're kind of building upon these prior efforts here. Again, just noting again the recognition of the deed restriction about the dam and the lowering that we've noted before in previous meetings.
Nils, I think if you don't mind just going back to that
Yeah.
slide, I just because that question did come up about full dam removal, so I think it was just important and bold that bottom there is
Yeah.
that apparently there is a deed that was I guess generated as part of the redevelopment of the mill complex there that prohibits complete dam removal. So I wanted to add just to bring that up because that was a specific question last time.
Yeah.
Even though one of our alternatives and does look at a pretty much a 5-foot removal, which is pretty much the complete removal of man-made portion of that dam itself, because again, this dam was apparently built on a natural falls location. But again, just wanted to highlight that, full removal seems to be a deed restriction right now.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Because it was my understanding that the deed restriction was a 2-foot lowering and didn't say anything about dam removal. Are those there's two same things or two separate things?
I took this directly from a document that was put up there on the top right, and it might be so. That document said it prohibits complete dam removal. So yeah, I'm fully aware that there's a 2-foot lowering, which is why that is our first alternative. But yeah, I don't know if Jason and or John or anybody else knows completely, because I think that's one of my next step items is we probably do want to do a deed research just to see exactly what that restriction is. But yeah, right now that statement in quotes is from a document that was put out in 2018 by EMRRP on that one.
Yeah, we have the covenant and the deed. I'm happy to send that to you right now.
Please.
Okay. All right, I'll just keep going here in the interest of time. Again, just leading into the field work that was done. Again, we did get a survey of different portions of the site. Obviously, we've evaluated and inspected the facility itself in terms of what it's comprised, look at the documents in terms of how it's constructed and where the bedrock is shown. And there's a couple of profiles that show that here. Again, just kind of giving a little bit of a perspective as to what the existing conditions here are at the site in the different areas. Again, looking at both the Conrail and the Roosevelt Avenue bridges, as those are, kind of hydraulic choke points that Sean can clarify in terms of the different alternatives. And again, we do have mapping that we received from DOT that does indicate that the presence or the construction of the foundations for these structures. Again, just a general map of the topographic survey and the bathymetric surveys that were completed at the site. That's also an attachment in terms of a base map plan that's been developed. Again, just looking at the delineations of the site and the different types of wetlands that have been flagged and mapped at the site as well. Presence of the ordinary high water. Again, just the RIGIS in the National Wetlands Inventory mapping, continuing upstream through the 2 bridges. And again, that's kind of ties in with the assessment of potential changes to these wetland habitats based upon the different dam lowering, if you will, alternatives. This is really just, the cultural assessment of the site that PAL completed. Again, just the area of study that was developed as part of this project. And again, noting the natural historic district that is adjacent to the site, and then also a potentially eligible area down there at the Green and Daniels Mill. And again, just recommending consultations. Here we're just getting into the sediment testing program where samples were taken, what those results were. You can see that we did get kind of reference samples at both upstream and downstream locations, downstream being at the Slater Mill Dam. And again, I won't go into the weeds of what the results were, but kind of characteristic of what you might expect in the Blackstone River. And just moving into the, again, target species, their characteristics and swimming capabilities that guide or govern the evaluation of the alternatives. Again, looking at some of the hydrology for the gauge stations at the site and just identifying what those upstream migration period flows are for the 95, 50, and 5% exceedance levels. Hydraulic modeling, and really just showing the model development that was, taken here to get kind of a base conditions hydraulic model of what conditions are at the site and calibrating that model for the evaluations themselves. Again, this is all part of what we had discussed last week. Sean developed a couple of graphics just to depict here what those might look like in terms of construction of a vertical fishway or a nature-like fishway. But again, these kind of correspond to the alternatives that were developed in the previous meeting. Again, I won't spend a lot of time going through this because we went through this last time. But again, just documenting what the characteristics and the metrics are for the alternatives here for the vertical slot fishway under a 2-foot dam removal. Again, obviously a longer length, a greater head pond drop for 2 foot. And then as you go through to the 4 foot and the 5 foot dam removal, incrementally the fishway gets shorter. But again, that's all, tied into here as to what happens when you start to lower the impoundment, you start to increase velocity through the Roosevelt Avenue Bridge, and that becomes a potential hydraulic barrier for each of these alternatives under those, 5 foot or perhaps 4 foot removals that we can, clarify. Again, just the alternatives 2A corresponding to the, general layout for the power canal for the construction of these alternatives. And as, again, the head pond drop goes down to a 5 foot, the fishway itself becomes shorter. This is just a couple of profiles that Sean and Katie put together just to show, again, where the profile of the vertical slot fishway would align to the profile of the facility here in the bedrock. So again, no major conflicts here in terms of bedrock, but again, just kind of showing what might be entailed in terms of construction. Alternative 3 is the one with that assumes maintenance or continuing hydropower facility operations here. If the FERC license were to be granted, again, just kind of showing the layout here with a turn back for the exit. And then as, of course, the dam removal increases, then, you get into a scenario where you can avoid the fold back and then just have an aligned linear fishway within the river channel itself. Again, as you get down further, you start to get into issues of the entrance or the exit channel, as well as the entrance channel as the fishway becomes shorter within the river. Then this would, obviously entail a lot of design considerations with, flow confusion and distraction at the hydropower facility outlet. So again, that would be another set of design issues that we'd have to work through for this alternative. These are just laying out some of the alternatives that were identified but not further evaluated, just in terms of feasibility. And again, just looking at some of these considerations with regard to the noise study that was performed and, sound levels associated with the different alternatives, excuse me, and the different obviously dam removal lowering. showing again just a influence of the velocities or the head pond lowerings on velocities at the bridges that you can see. Again, potential issues with scour for these bigger storm events at the Roosevelt Avenue Bridge, and less of a concern at the Conrail Bridge based upon it being further upstream and the effect being more muted. Again, just looking at the velocities during the migration periods at the Roosevelt Avenue Bridge for these different lowerings. And, Sean, do you want to just kind of try to outline your evaluation here quickly?
Yeah, so basically all this was just kind of plugging a little bit of clearly once you start to exceed the prolonged speed of the target species, which is about 3 feet per second, the fish kind of need to tap into their energy a little bit more. So it was just kind of plugging into a calculator if we want them to get through the Roosevelt Avenue Bridge. Only really looked at that location because that really was the location that popped up as being the location of the greatest velocities, the restriction and flow through the river currently. So it's just a matter of plugging that in, seeing, well, okay, how far can you expect river herring to, I guess to swim at a speed of, they have to get through 50 feet. So that velocity through this calculator kind of worked out to be about 4.5 to 5 feet per second. So that's kind of what we looked at. So, any of the alternatives that kind of resulted in, velocities that would potentially, approach 4.5 or 5 feet per second, we're just kind of highlighted in red here is just again an area that potentially creating a velocity barrier depending on the dam removal scenario. Again, not fully understanding that there may be columns that the fish can actually find. This is more just a straight engineering review where this is what the velocity of the model's showing and kind of just points out, where we're starting to approach or exceed that threshold value.
John, I have a quick question. So the previous slide referenced the 100-year flood, the 50-year flood, and in relation to like scour.
Mm-hmm.
So what flood did you consider? Oh, I see, 100-year, 50-year storms.
Yeah, those.
But
Yeah,
then the next slide when you're talking about
fish passage only.
Yeah, the fish passage. Did you use specific storms or what flow? What
You
was
can
your
see
typical flow?
there the 5%, 95% exceedances. So
Can you
that's
explain
strictly from an
exceedance?
upstream migration standpoint. Yeah. I mean, it's just typical practice that when you design your fishways, and or assess fish passage for effectiveness, you're looking at what they call the 5%, the 95%, and the 50% exceedances. So that's generally your range of flow during the upstream migration season, which here is from April 1st through July 15th. And, we kind of look at just the last 15 years or so of that data just to be a little bit more accurate in terms of climate change. But that's,
So
that's standard.
I'm getting hung up on the word exceedance because I don't use it in my day-to-day.
Yes.
So a 5% exceedance is good, and like a 95% exceedance is really tough.
This is just in terms of flows. What that means is that, so it has nothing to do with passage of efficiency. It's just actual flow. So what that means is that 5% exceedance, only 5% of the time during the upstream migration period will flows exceed that value.
Okay.
So that's basically the high range of what we design our fish passage for.
All right.
And then the 95% exceedance obviously is like 95% of the time in the spring we'll say the flows are higher than this value. So that's your low value. So
with that in mind, can you go back to that other slide? Because I didn't understand what exceedance really meant.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hold on. Let me just go back to that one. Sorry about that. Bear with me here.
Sorry, everybody, in case if you all are experts, I just didn't really.
Yeah, so generally
But this makes more sense now.
Yeah. So at the lower flow periods, like that's not a problem for the fish. So when generally the lower flow periods that you're going to see, a lot of times they're starting to get towards the tail end of the upstream migration season, right? As you kind of approach that low flow season in July. So there's no problems there. It's only during the higher spring flow so that you're going to start to see the velocities in the river kind of get or at least through the bridge start to result in velocities where the fish are going to have to kind of tap into their I don't want to say their burst speed, but they're going to have to use more energy since their prolonged speed is only like 3 feet per second. So that's all that's kind of outlining like, hey, a little bit of a red flag, we start taking that dam down more than what I kind of found is you start removing it 3 feet or more, then you're starting to look at velocities approaching or exceeding kind of that threshold value where we may need to consider now looking into the actual geometry and everything under that bridge in more detail and maybe potentially proposing improvements if we need to. So.
And Sean, when you're looking at those, so 5% exceedance meaning it doesn't get this high very often, but it gets this high sometimes. That does seem to, you're saying spring flows, which would correlate to the time when fish are migrating as well?
Yes. Yeah.
So,
This is all based on the upstream migration season. Yeah.
okay, so this is all narrowed down to when the migration season is. It's not throughout the year.
Correct. This is I'm only in this case I'm kind of only worried about the higher spring flows and getting the upstream migrants through there.
Thanks.
And I guess I mean again Nils you can go ahead, but just to
Yeah.
add one last thing because the other thing I also look at a little bit is that entire river section from, for instance, Valley Falls Dam all the way down through the Elizabeth Webbing Dam. Just to kind of see like what are the hydraulics through the river? What are my velocities through there now? And I think that the greatest velocity that I was seeing was somewhere. It was somewhere in between the lower and the upper Conrail Bridge. I feel like, that's where the slope of the river starts to kind of increase a little bit. But even at the highest point right now, the greatest velocity during the upstream migration season, not flood flows, beginning that, but the upstream migration season was probably around like 4 point, I want to say 87. So maybe 4.9-ish right now. So that's kind of about, at least in this whole section from Elizabeth Webbing up to the next dam, Valley Falls. That's about what the greatest velocity that I was seeing under existing conditions, which is still, conducive, really, I would say, to passage. So it's really, kind of just getting a feel for the river here and what I know from fish passage. And yeah, that once we start getting to that 5 feet per second, now we're starting to look at velocities that are greater than, anywhere in that section of the river now. That they're currently experiencing, if the fish were actually there active and moving upstream.
This graphic just kind of correlates to what Sean was outlining for fish passage considerations, but it's really just applying these profiles, hydraulic profiles you see here on the left, to the potential groundwater and ecological conversions that might occur upstream. Again, we didn't do a refined analysis of what would happen. We just know where those resources are that might potentially be altered based upon a changed profile and depth of water and extent of inundation and period of inundation, for these different areas. Obviously not going to go through this slide, but it's really just outlining the sediment field investigation that was completed in terms of where these samples were and where the results were, relative to the criteria. Again, just looking here at the fish passage restoration alternatives assessment, and again, just looking at flood reduction benefits, if you will, for lowering of the base flood elevation upstream for the different alternatives, and again, ranging up to a foot to a couple tenths of a foot, depending on the alternative and the location here of where you are.
Yeah, and I think, Nils, just to add, just anybody looking at that. So, what these values in this chart represent is essentially upstream of Roosevelt Ave. Like clearly, anyone can say, well, if you take out the dam, it's going to drop water levels, which it will, and the biggest impact will be from the dam to Roosevelt Bridge because the Roosevelt Bridge is actually functioning a little bit as a hydraulic restriction. So, what I wanted to kind of show is, well, you have most of your properties upstream of Roosevelt Bridge that would potentially benefit from a lowering of the dam itself. So what this kind of shows is that honestly, like for a a 2 foot, I'm sorry, a 4 foot or a 5 foot, there's really not much of a difference between the flood benefits between the scenarios. And again, it's a lot of it has to do with Roosevelt Ave functioning somewhat as a hydraulic restriction, as well as just the elevation. The channel grade kind of steepens as you move upstream of Roosevelt Ave. So you start to see a little bit less of benefits from removing the dam itself. So I think the takeaway from this is, I mean, clearly, yes, for a 10-year storm, you're going to see greater reductions, right? 50-year, a little bit less than the 10-year, and then the 100 is, which is what flood insurance is based on, which is why I just selected that one here. But the point being is that there's not a whole, I didn't see a major benefit to flood reductions from either of these scenarios when you're looking at, the river channel upstream of Roosevelt Ave.
Okay.
This also just touches on a
Yeah, the
question.
drought, yeah.
Oops, yeah, that
Yeah.
came up too, regarding
Yep.
resiliency, because, not only does climate change, impact the intensity, frequency of some of the flood flows, but it also, is expected to result in, drier periods, drought periods. So it kind of just put a few graphics up here that show, which type of fishways, how they generally perform under drought, periods. So clearly a nature lake, for instance, is deemed to be more resilient than the vertical slot, which is semi-resilient to it, and the vertical slot obviously is better than the previously considered denials. Through some, I think the Army Corps options looked at denials, so that's why that was kind of added up here.
And considering we've had a lot of pretty significant droughts in the past few years, I think that's such an important consideration. So thank you for bringing that up.
It is, and the thing that, one of the other things I looked at too is, like, for instance, when we look at I'm going to say the fishway exit, which is the upstream end of whatever fish passage structure we're proposing, making sure that, for instance, the invert of that, even during is at least greater than 1.5 feet below the crest of the spillway, right? So that way we always know that even if there was theoretically no flow coming through the river, or very little, you would expect that the dam, the spillway, is going to impound or back up water at least to the spillway crest level, So I just always made sure that, the invert of whatever structure we're proposing is going to be deep enough that, the fish will still be able to get through there. You at least have, 1.5 feet, which I kind of use 1.5 feet as a guide, just because I'm looking at American shad, which is kind of the bigger fish of the species. So trying to just excuse me, provide like two body depths of that fish. So hopefully we'll always have, some flow running through here with enough depth that even resident species can kind of hopefully make it through there.
All right. Just, this is a kind of the last segment of the report here in terms of the criteria. Again, we kind of went through these in the last meeting in terms of what different types of criteria and specifically categories that we identified, as well as, obviously cost and maintenance needs for these. And again, we have criteria for effectiveness, if you will, of each of these different alternatives. Just again, listing order of magnitude costs associated with these as well. For the different alternatives, ranging from 5 million for a fishway in the channel itself, river channel, vertical slot, to up to 8 million for a nature lake bypass channel within the power canal. And again, these are all based upon projections of a future period of construction and a range, depending on what the market range will be. So
one quick question on that, Neil.
Yeah, sure.
It might not be within the scope of what you folks are doing.
Yep.
But it's the cost of providing the fishway, but is the cost of removing different heights of dams incorporated in that?
Yes, yeah,
Yep.
yeah, they are, and obviously alternatives one and two are also contingent upon the hydropower facility being removed. So we've included the cost of the hydropower removal as well in alternatives one and two. But yeah, all three do include spillway lowering.
Yep. Yeah, we didn't, I mean, Sean, you also carried a certain amount of, and again, this will be part of our internal review here over the next couple of weeks for handling and management of sediment that may be encountered. So obviously we're
Yeah,
making
yeah.
assumptions about the volume and how it would need to be disposed and the cost for that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say, but it's because obviously, the idea is, especially when we looked at some of the profiles of what the fishway bottom of the fishway channel would be in respect to, the bottom of currently the turbine, facility, and they go much lower. So obviously, anything that we're kind of excavating, if we can use it underneath the fishway and bury it, that will be the intent here. But yeah, I think any excess materials hauled off site, there's a likelihood they, obviously may need to go off to a licensed facility. So the assumption is just any of the earth removal quantity that we calculated. I think that we used, I don't know, I think we went 50% on the assumption that whatever is being hauled off, 50% of that value is going to probably be hauled off at a premium price to cover hauling it off to a facility.
Okay. Again, kind of looking at, the alternative, right now, again, based upon the analyses that we've completed with the alternative 2A with a vertical slot fishway and the power canal and a 2.75 foot drop seems to be, the what's most advantageous given all the criteria. So again, this will be something that we revisit with Jason and Matt and John, and work through the other internal reviews for this report, and then we'll again provide this for a wider distribution so that folks have a chance to look at it and ask questions as well.
Yeah, I think Mills, just to add, like one of the things that this, for instance, the vertical slot, it's narrower, right? It's 12 feet wide versus the Nature Lake, which is 22 feet wide. So one of the things that this does do, it provides a little bit more opportunity for, I guess, open space enhancement over here. Because I think that's one of the restoration goals, I think, for the city too, in terms of, open space area along the river here. So, I think this alternative, even though I don't get into detail about restoration, and I know that we all talked about downstream portage. I think that's the idea with an alternative like this, is really to take advantage of some of the open space that's going to create, and enhance that for public usage, kind of like, I know Overmill, I think it's called Overmill Overlook Park, just upstream of Roosevelt Ave, kind of take advantage of this open space that's going to be created with this alternative to enhance that public access and, usement ability here. And obviously, we had talked about, potentially, including downstream portage as part of the project. So that, again, that's going to be in I think the next steps, which is included on, subsequent slide. But just wanted to highlight that. I just show kind of green in there for some of the area showing green space, but again, there's no detail. It's really open as to what we do in terms of enhancement there.
And then viewing opportunities here, Sean, the fishway, it's up to what, 15, more than 15 feet top of wall down to bottom of channel. Again here, so we would.
It does vary. Yeah, it varies. I feel like it's closer to like, the 10 to 15 range on the upstream side, and then clearly it gets deeper towards the downstream side, closer to probably even approaches 20 feet or so.
Yeah.
So I mean, whether we do railings, whether we,
do a grading or
do a grading. I mean, we're definitely going to need to do a grading over a portion of this, which I kind of have shown there in the gray hatched area, just so that we are allowing access from, the parking area, because there is there's an easement really in the condominium complex to allow people to use this park. So we at least need to have access to the public viewing platform that's out there now. So we definitely need to do that. But, there's opportunities if we want to have another crossing somewhere, right? If we want to if it would be better for Portage to put another crossing over it, there's certainly opportunities to do that.
Okay, and that kind of brings us to the last slide here, which is really just the next steps. And again, just refining the preferred alternative, whether it stays as this one here. Again, this is just where Fuss and O'Neill's evaluation has landed, but we want to take time to look at these more closely. And then we'll be making some additional revisions to this report based upon internal review, and then we'll provide a copy out for folks to review themselves. So I guess that's it. We're getting close to the end of the time. I'll obviously any questions folks have. I do have to sign off at 11 o'clock, but I don't know, Sean, you could probably stay on if folks want to look at things more closely.
I actually might have a construction meeting.
Yeah.
To be at 11.
We have to jump at 11 too, because someone's
Okay.
using this room.
Yes, I do.
Just an observation that DEM wetlands permitting, I don't think is gonna be super excited about filling in part of the power canal to create upland open space for a park. I know I feel I'm gonna have to digest that a little bit. I don't know how I feel about that. If it's currently water, even though it's part of infrastructure for the powerhouse, it feels bad to fill that in to put a park. And given that the nature-like fishway was more resilient to drought and is larger, I guess I need some time to look at those differences to see why 1A beat out over 1B.
So you had that whole matrix last time that you showed, and you said that you would add more information in there. Is that something that you have that you could share again with that, whatever additional information? Okay.
Of course. Yeah, it will be put out when, again, we can complete our internal review. Again, this is kind of a snapshot in time as to where things are right now with regard to this draft, report and evaluation. But, when we complete the internal review, we'll distribute that.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a nutshell, again, it's not looking at any one particular thing, right? The matrix kind of considers a lot of different things. Clearly, fish passage, we've given it a higher design criteria ranking, but I think that the main difference why the vertical slot edged out the nature like was one, the vertical slot's 12 feet wide, right? That kind of fits in the width of most of that existing channel now. Clearly it flares open at the upstream and downstream ends, but it's about 12 once it kind of narrows down. And that coincided exactly with what the vertical slot was. So there's a little bit less like earthwork involved in that. The nature lake fishway, in order to keep energy dissipation factors in the pools to 3.15 or less, which again is typical, and we're restricted by the length of how long that nature lake needs to be. We had to widen it. So basically it goes from, for instance, the vertical slot width is 12, the nature lake width is 22 feet wide. So clearly going 22 feet wide, there's a lot more earthwork involved. So that's why I think the costs for the nature lake were greater than the vertical slot. There was a little bit more earthwork involved. I think that, yes, resiliency wise, the nature lake probably edged out. It does generally edge out the vertical slot. I think in terms of efficiency, the vertical slot may be better, a little bit better. Again, I'm talking marginally. I'm not talking, significantly better, but marginally better than the nature like in terms of looking at all of the all the species collectively. So I think that's why they were close. It's not like one like really jumped out as significantly better than the other, but yeah, I think that's why
So I'm hearing that you need to excavate, in fact, to do a nature lake.
Correct. It's got to be 22 feet wide, right? In order to keep
I misunderstood that. I thought it was already 22 feet wide. So thank you for clarifying.
Well, no, but you're right. At the actually, as you flare out at the upstream and downstream ends, clearly those widths of the raceway channel are wider, right? But yeah, right now the where it necks down that channel, it's 12 feet wide currently. That's the existing width of the raceway channel. as it necks down and gets into the facility. Whereas, yes, so the nature lake would have to be 10 feet wider than that. So there's more earthwork involved, which is why the cost for the nature lakes a little was more.
I would just throw in that their work was guided by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Fish Passage Engineering team, Alden Labs, and our own DEM fisheries people. So when it comes to thinking about the performance as far as fish passage is concerned, I think they had great references and I think it was well thought out for the reaching out and incorporating all of the body of knowledge and information as far as fish passage is concerned. And the other thing is just to remind everybody, we're halfway there. We have completed phase 1. So we have like a 30% design and we have an alternative analysis completed. January 1, we started on phase 2 with Narragansett Bay Estuary Programs funding. And that hopefully brings this to 60% design and permit documents, just like we're doing Main Street Slate.
Just for the sake of time, because we're talking about a lot of alternatives that are over 2 feet, I think hearing from Jason on his meeting with Mr. Yip would be super helpful to know if that's even possible.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Was that to me, Kevin?
It was.
Yeah. So yeah, I had a meeting, actually orchestrated it through Mayor Rivera's office. And it was great. Louis Yip's about the nicest guy you'd ever want to meet. It was a really great meeting. But just to cut to the chase, we need to go back to him with specifics at some point so he can really kind of look at it and understand what we're talking about. But I talked to him about the potential that, we need to go past 2 feet for X, Y, and Z reasons. I also brought him that little, article about not article, but the research about the sound, which he appreciated. So long story short, he's totally open to it. He's really supportive of the project. The only concern that both he and the mayor voiced to me was, the parking. So that's something we at DEM will have to think about. We only have a couple of spaces down there, so it's not like this area is going to be really conducive to big crowds of people coming down and having parking to sort of look. But that was it. I mean, it feels like a problem that we can resolve and work together on. They really are supportive of portage in this area too. Like that was something, having people in the area via canoe and kayaks and things like that was something they were both really positive about. So that was a good conversation as well. So yeah, good meeting. He's open to it. So when we're ready, to kind of talk a little more specifically, he's ready to talk. And yeah, it was a good meeting.
So I'm assuming that there haven't been any other conversations around that sort of short-term portage improvement of whether it's like putting in steps on the downside or just adding that accessible kayak launch on the upside.
Excuse me. I think that was Stephanie. I did not, Stephanie. Again, it was just like we were just sort of chatting in the mayor's office, so we didn't get super specific. What I got to thinking about though is I don't know if that property on the other side is his. As we've discussed before, I think it would be a challenge for DEM and or Fuss and O'Neill to kind of design in something that doesn't meet certain criteria, but there may be an opportunity to talk directly with Louis Yip about that and leave us out of it, if you know what I mean. So, that, they liked the idea. I can say that much to you of like proving the area.
If he's amenable to, either you can share my contact information, or if I'm able to have his, I'd love to set up a meeting and maybe bring in our landscape architect that we're working with our Kitticut Restored project, which looks at access, and we can talk through that a little bit more. We'd love to have that conversation.
Yeah, I can try and facilitate that, Stephanie, if you want, just making that contact and then you guys can take it from there.
Thank you. That would be great. We talked about, the next thing on the agenda was easements, which we talked about earlier. I wanted to just really quickly mention, this isn't specific fish passage, but it kind of affects our greater fish passage project of updates on other hydro or dam projects. I don't know if Mandeville's technically been taken off the table, but it feels like that's slowed down, or there haven't been updates. I don't know if anyone else has heard anything about Mandeville Hydro. And then for Ashton, Jason, I don't know if you have talked to Chuck or Terry about this, but I know John Marsland from Friends of Blackstone had reached out to Terry asking what's going on with Ashton, because they had put in a request to FERC that they waive all their ride and water quality permits, their 401, and John was really concerned about that. And if you have had this conversation, feel free to jump in and say it better than I will. But basically, Chuck said there's federal water quality and then there's state water quality. So FERC might not know the difference, but RIDEM does. And when Ashton or New England Hydro applied 2 years ago, the state came back and said, you need to actually prove that you can even be eligible to be the applicant. It's not clear that you're eligible to be the applicant on this permit at all, and they never got a response. And so after that time period closed, they just shut down the permit and said, okay, this is not a complete permit, you've never actually really technically applied. And Ashton or New England Hydro took that as, we applied and you never responded, basically, is what they're saying. And so they're saying to FERC, I would like a waiver of this permit because RIDEM's not doing what they should be doing. And Chuck said, no, we're going to provide a comment letter to FERC that says, these are two different things. This is why they haven't met the requirements. They shouldn't get a waiver of this. Jason, have you had the same conversation, or is there anything that I'm saying wrong there?
Yeah, no, sorry, Stephanie. No, that all sounds, maybe just to clarify. So Chuck, DM's kind of split into two sides, and Chuck is on the other side of the house here. But Chuck and I talk a lot, and he's great. So I don't know, like, everything. If that's what he said to you, I would take it as like gospel. That guy knows what he's doing for sure. I can add, though, that I do interact here a little bit because I think they need a couple of permanent easements on some property that we own to be able to do this. And, there was a period of time a while ago where we were kind of moving towards working, with them on something. But I had some discussions with the director, and I don't think we are inclined to do that anymore, but I've not heard anything on that in months and months. So I'll have to kind of circle back with DM legal, excuse me, to see, if anything new has popped up since we last spoke. But we may have even sent them a letter denying their request for those permanent easements. But I'll check on that and we'll report back to the group next time, Stephanie.
Thank you very much. I can also just share that email that you sent, because I'm summarizing, but maybe I said something now.
No, you did an excellent job. That sounds exactly what happened.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, and I assume that there haven't been any updates from OneDrop.
I mean, it looks like they have the only thing I try to look at is the history on this. So obviously they've applied to FERC. Um, Looks like they're in the process with FERC now. I think something is scheduled. I believe if you go online, they'll have their FERC timeline on there for January of 26. I don't know if that's to move forward with I don't know, phase 1 or 2 of the application. I forget exactly, but it looks like it's underway. I don't know. I mean, that's.
But that would be in the same dead zone that Ashton would be if DEM declined easements on their land. So it'd be the same pickup.
I just wanted to mention that I know Ryden's been in conversation, at least with Senator Whitehouse's office on WRDA funding. I assume that there hasn't been any other updates on either WRDA or no applications or any other funding.
Nothing on my end, Stephanie. There's been a lot of back and forth on WRDA with the congressional delegation. I think it was Magaziner's office checked in on that as well. So they're kind of aware of our project, but nothing beyond that.
Okay.
Actually, I think Rachel is maybe in the room with you there. Rachel, has Caitlin, I know she was going to check in with NOAA once the government shutdown ended. I just don't know if she ever had a chance to do that. Have you heard anything from Caitlin about that?
We don't have an update there. I know our communication's been tough because of backlogs. So we're just starting to get meetings rolling again with our NOAA contacts. So I'm hoping that we'll have something to report out on in January.
Thanks.
Well, thank you.
I know we're at time. The last thing on our agenda, just to mention that we've been trying to continuously update our website. So if anyone has feedback as we go, please feel free to shoot that along to us and we will make sure that we're being as clear and representative as possible. And also our Fish Passage Parade, we're hoping to do Saturday, May 16th, but we haven't actually chosen what we want to do yet. So if, again, people have feedback on that, if we should go back to more of the parade style at Slater, we have that conversation with Slater. If we want to continue doing more of the paddle at Central Falls Landing, we have that conversation with BDTC, or we want to do something else. I think the easy button answer for the collaborative is to go and do the paddle style with the Tourism Council again, if folks aren't opposed to that, but if we want to tweak it or change it in some way, we'd love to have that conversation. So it's not a definite save the date because we haven't talked to our host organizations yet, but we just wanted to throw it out there. Well, thank you everybody for taking the time going over this. Thanks to Blackstone for doing all those really great presentations. And once you do have your internal review, if you could send those along and we can link them to the notes, that would be great. Great. Thanks everybody.
Sounds good, everyone. Thank you.
Thank
you all.
Thank you too.